welcome to a very special edition of The Piano Men with Stanley Carr. Joining me on the show tonight is Nashville singer-songwriter and pianist Kevin Adams. Originally from Washington, D.C., Adams moved to Nashville in 1996 to be a songwriter for Buddy Killin's KMG Publishing. After KMG, Adams toured for over 20 years with major country acts such as Wade Hayes, Pam Tillis, LeeAnn Womack, Rascal Flatts, Joe Nichols and Joe Diffie. Adams formed the band The Blue Heelers with Eddie Dunbar, Shane Sutton, and Pat MacDonald, and later signed with Giant Records. The band recorded one album in 2004 and occasionally still plays. Recently, Adams recorded an album of some of his favorite jazz compositions, with more music to come. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Nice to have you on.
Well, thank you, Stanley. Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. I actually, let's talk a little bit about how we met each other. So, we actually met each other a couple of years ago in 2020, before the pandemic began. You were on George's show, George Adams' show, Geo on the Radio. I think we reconnected a couple of years later when things kind of resumed, and that's when I invited you to come on the show. So it's great to finally make it happen.
Yep, that's great to be here.
Yeah. So you grew up in Washington, D.C. Tell me about your upbringing.
Well, I grew up, I was born in like 58, and I grew up in the greater D.C. area, and through the, all the way until about 96 when I moved. With a few times when I wasn't living there, but other than that, I was there for about 35 years or so.
35 years, wow, that's a long time.
Yep, and I had a lot of relatives, and it was my home. But now Nashville's definitely my home.
Music City.
Mm-hmm.
But you've seen a lot of things happen over the course of your life. I mean, we were talking earlier. I mean, you were in D.C. around the time when the Beatles were big.
Mm-hmm.
MLK gave his famous I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
And you got to see a lot of shows, a lot of concerts.
Yep, I did through the 70s and stuff. I did see the Beatles in 66 when they played at D.C. Stadium. And it was back when John had, said the whole thing about being bigger than God or Jesus or whatever he said. And so the Klan was there, and it was a really interesting show. But I was about 7 or so.
7?
And my mother took me to see it. And she was a singer and a piano player. And she liked the Beatles, and she liked the harmonies. And so I couldn't believe it when she said she was going to take me to see them. So,
was that around the time when you knew this is what you wanted to do, be a musician? Yeah,
kind of. I mean, even long before that, I was around my mother where she was playing and singing, and so I always was messing around with the piano from when I was about 3, and I started writing little things, and I never stopped, really. So.
Did you have a piano in your house growing up?
Yeah, we had a little spinet, and she would practice her vocalises on it and her finger exercises, and she'd show me things, and she taught me basic harmony, and so that's what kind of got me my start playing in my first little grade school bands and stuff, so that was cool.
So is it fair to say that your mom was your first teacher? Did you have
Definitely.
Did you have other instructors as well that helped
Nothing
you out?
like that, though. My mother was definitely, when I would watch her play, I would want to play, that would make me want to make music, whatever that was. I didn't know. And then, so I told her I wanted to play, and so she got me a teacher, and I learned a little bit with that, and I just kind of took it from there,
We just had Mother's Day. There's nothing like having somebody like your mom be such an inspiration in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So who were some of your first influences as a musician?
Well, I guess, early on, she played a lot of like singer jazz kind of torch songs and things like that with either trio accompaniment behind it or orchestral. And so I really loved the harmonies and the things. And she liked Cuban music too. And so I got to listen to a lot of Cuban rhythms and things like that, which I really loved. And so, and she bought me a little drum, a little snare drum and a cymbal. And so I got to start playing a little drums, which I'm sure she liked a lot. And but I stayed with piano for the most part. I picked up a little sax, a little guitar, but for the most part, I stayed with piano.
It's always good to kind of be, well versed and, be a little, learn about as much as you can about, different instruments. That's kind of how it's like learning different skills on a job. That's how you become employable.
Right.
Do you remember some of the first records you bought growing up?
Well, the first ones I remember were the Beatle records, that she bought like in, 64. And I just couldn't get enough of that,
No.
And so we would get together as kids and pretend like we were playing in a band, playing on boxes and stuff. So I like that a lot. They really inspired me a lot to get into the music business, kind of.
They definitely were like the proto band, they like we talked about earlier, they did, everything before it became popular.
Right.
Huge, I mean, listen to, a song like Revolution, that's like years before AC/DC, made hard rock what it is today. I mean, they pioneered it.
Yep.
Or like the hip hop stuff like we were talking about, the loops and everything.
Yep.
So you grew up in DC. Did you play around the area at all?
I did. I played there for quite a few years in different bands, and I played. There was a circuit that they had go-go music in DC, and I played in a couple go-go bands with some of the guys that used to play in the Soul Searchers. What was the band? Chuck. I used to know. Anyway. They did that tune, "Bustin' Loose."
Yeah.
And it was a kind of the first introduction of the world to the go-go sound.
Sure.
And that rhythm that they had, And then there was other bands like EU that did that "Doing the Butt," which is the same groove. And all those guys were playing there when I was there too. Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. That's what his name. And so some of the guys from that band, Leroy Fleming had a band called Leroy, and we played go-go music, and it was blast, man. It was great.
Who do you consider like the important mentors in your life when you started out as a musician?
Well, I didn't have anyone else other than my mother for that, and then. When I got a little bit older, I moved away. I moved up to Massachusetts, up to Lenox, and I studied jazz up there at the American Music Workshop. It was about 1978 till about 80. And those guys really set me down the path of trying to play jazz, and they definitely mentored me. And so I got to play with some people that were pretty noteworthy. There was a guy named Clifford Jarvis, who was a drummer that played with Sun Ra and a lot of guys back in the 60s. And he was really great. And he was very inspirational, and, he really helped me to become more confident.
So I guess at that point, like because it seems like you were like really big into rock for a while. Tell me about like the difference between rock and jazz at that point for you. Like,
well, I didn't really get I got into rock around 74.
Okay.
With maybe a little earlier with some of the guys like Jeff Beck Group.
Yeah.
And Johnny Winter and The Who, and then I got into the more progressive stuff.
Yes.
Like Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock and Mahavishnu Orchestra. And I got to see all those guys play back then, and so it made me want to just push myself past what I was at. I just wanted to keep breaking through barriers.
But it was in college where when you learned from the professors and
Mm-hmm.
mentors that you had, that's when you kind of started feeling like, cool, this is pretty nice.
Yeah. Well, and I never thought I had a chance of playing jazz or anything,
Sure.
but when they, would give you the confidence, they'd make fun of you a little bit, but then, when you got better, they'd tell you, So it was cool.
It's honest feedback.
Yeah. And you had to kind of take your lumps a little bit, because the music business isn't always easy. So you got to start out by going, this isn't easy.
Sure. Sure. So we'll go ahead and we'll play this next selection here. This is Flying the Coop. Explain to me, Kevin, about the making of this song. What kind of instruments are used here?
Well, this is a band called the Blue Healers. The song was written by Eddie Dunbar and Tom Drennan. And it's just a quartet. It's bass, drums, guitar, and piano. And we recorded it down on the Row, Music Row, at a place called 17 Grand. I don't know if it's still there anymore. And we went in there and recorded a bunch of songs, and that was just one of them.
Sure.
And it's kind of what, sort of a pickin' tune, like Hummingbird or something.
Sure.
So it was a fireworks kind of song.
Nice. So we'll go ahead and play Flying the Coop right here on the Piano Men. All right. That was Flying the Coop right here on the Piano Men. I'm chatting with Nashville pianist and singer-songwriter Kevin Adams tonight about his illustrious career. And we were talking about, you went to school in Massachusetts, and we will talk a little bit about your eventual move here to Nashville. But tell me about what you were doing, a little bit about where you were between your time in Massachusetts and before you moved to the Music City.
Well, after I got out of the go-go scene in D.C., I put together another band that played around town a lot.
Okay.
And we played places like the Bayou and places that don't exist anymore in D.C. And that's when I met my my ex-wife, which would be my partner. We started a band, and for the next, I guess, 12 or so years, we played around the eastern part of the country, everywhere from the south to the north, Maine to Minnesota to Florida. I mean, we were just all over. Mm-hmm. And playing kind of top 40 dance music and stuff like that. And at some point, she decided to go country. So we turned into a country band, had to buy a bunch of country clothes and stuff and boots and stuff, and got out and started playing on the road. And eventually she said, let's just move to Nashville. So we did. And we moved to Nashville in 96. And so that was kind of the time between when I was in the jazz thing and when I moved to Nashville. It was about 20 years of playing around then.
Around the country.
Yeah.
Were you always a big country music fan growing up? Or
I really never heard country music until I moved to Nashville. I just I learned some country tunes when we started doing the country band, and it was 90s stuff, Alan Jackson, and she was singing, Trisha Yearwood stuff, and
Garth.
We did some of that. I did some singing, but not a lot. She was mainly the main vocalist, and I was just doing backups and stuff. So.
And you later got a job working for Buddy Killin at his publishing company, KMG. Tell me about Buddy, and what was your role like working for him?
Well, Buddy was a really interesting guy. He knew everybody. We played at the Stockyard Restaurant in the Bullpen Lounge down there for about a year and a half, and he would bring all these TV and movie stars down there, and I got to meet so many people I never would have thought I would ever meet in a million years, like Jack Palance and Burt Reynolds, and and stuff like that. So that was really interesting part of it, And then I got on with this artist named Shelley Wright, and we started playing. We played some road gigs, and when I got back from the road, the bullpen had closed, and all my gear was pushed into the corner. Ooh. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? And they let us all go, and so that was my. I had to transition from being in the bar band business to touring. Then after that,
that's got to be frustrating, when you lose a gig or lose a job. They just, yeah, that's it.
I didn't know what I was going to do because I was pretty new in town, and yeah, I've been here a couple years, but that wasn't quite enough to have a lot of contacts.
And it seems like you moved here in 96. You said 96, so a lot has changed between then and now. A lot of clubs, a lot of bars, a lot of venues have just disappeared,
And Broadway, when I moved here, was kind of run down. There wasn't the, there was Tootsie's and the Scoreboard or what? No, what was it? Legends or whatever, and then there was Wolfie's across the street there, and the Turf and places like that. And the Tornado got those things. Wolfie's closed up. I played there a few times with different people, kind of the gypsy jazz stuff. That was fun. And but yeah, he was a really interesting guy. He was a real song guy, and he could really hear a hit, he'd say.
So you worked with Buddy, and so what was your role like? Were you working for publishing? You were doing some
songwriting. Yeah. I was just me and my wife were working as a songwriting team, and then they had about 5 other writers there at the time, and but then he sold it and it went under. I admit he died soon after that. So.
And like you said, you've been touring with all different people, and we'll kind of talk a little bit later on in the show about some of the people you've toured with. But you've played all kinds of music. We've talked about country, jazz at this point. You had your Beatles influence growing up. In your personal opinion, what is your favorite genre to play, and why?
I think it's jazz, but I mean, I really do like playing any kind of music where everyone is on the same page and working together, listening to each other and reacting with each other. Any kind of thing like that is my favorite, whether it's jazz or blues or country or whatever, So the Blue Healers were kind of like that. They were very... it was a great bunch of guys. Eddie Dunbar and Shane Sutton, they still play downtown, and they hold down some really good nights in some of these clubs like Tootsie's and stuff, and the Stage, and then Pat MacDonald, and he worked for Charlie Daniels for years, and it was just a very inspirational band. Those guys were such incredible players that you just had to hang on, and hang on for dear life sometimes.
What year did you form the Blue Healers?
It was really soon after I moved here, and probably like 97, but maybe even the end of 96. Okay. And it was a 6-piece band at that point, and we had steel and fiddle, along with bass, drums, and guitar and keyboards. Wow. But when we we played the Asa Clubs back when it existed. And it was a big stage. And when that place closed, we moved over to the Fiddle and Steel Guitar Bar in Printer's Alley. Sure. It was a smaller place, and so we really couldn't fit a whole band on the stage. So we went down to 4 pieces, and that's when we just sort of became what we were.
Okay. You guys still play around sometimes?
We haven't since the pandemic, but I wouldn't be surprised if we'd play again,
things are looking up a little bit. You know, things are opening back up. You know, never say never.
I'd love to.
Yeah. We'll kind of segue here to this next selection. It's called Different World. This is with a band that you played with called American Limehouse.
That's correct.
Want to say it right. Want to make sure I get it right.
And the guitar player and the drummer are the same guys from the Healers, Pat MacDonald on drums and Shane Sutton on guitar. And now we've added a bass player, Randy Smith.
Okay.
And that's this band, American Limehouse.
All right. Here's Different World right here on the Piano Men. And we're back here on the Piano Men. We're talking with singer-songwriter and pianist Kevin Adams on the show tonight. And so right now on the show, I'm going to throw out some names of people you've played with, worked with over the years. And if you can, share some anecdotes from your time with them. We'll start with Pam Tillis.
Oh, well, I played with her for about a year. And it was in 2000. It was actually 1999.
Okay.
And so that was the Y2K year. So we played a New Year's show for that thing, and it was just funny because we all didn't know what to expect. Like when the clock train struck 12, was all the lights go off, you know? So we were just kind of, that was a weird one with that. Anyway, that was one of my first gigs with her.
Wow. Rascal Flatts.
Wow, that was a moving city, man. There was like, I don't even know how many trucks and buses they had, and it was just one amazing gig after another, you know. And we went to Abbey Road Studios and recorded there, and that was probably one of the highlights of my life, being in Abbey Road. And we spent the whole day there, and they showed us around, showed us all the old gear, and I got to play a lot, you know, the Steinway upright that, you know, was Lady Madonna, you know. It's all, they had all the piano keys are taken off of it, all the ivories are peeled off. It was all a piece of junk, but it sounded good.
You must have had butterflies.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Is that the you were with them when you did the Hannah Montana?
Yep,
too?
That's right. Yeah, we played on the. Yeah, I didn't have any speaking parts, but I'm sure I was a major part of that movie.
And who did you play on the Tonight Show with? Was that LeeAnn Womack?
And Rascal Flatts,
and
both.
Rascal Flatts.
Like this.
Talk about her too.
Every other, you know, it was like we played 1 week with Rascal Flatts, and then after I left them, I went back with LeeAnn, and about 2 weeks later, we were back at the Tonight Show again. So I played, you know, I felt like the house band.
Really?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, one of those shows, both of them were with Leno, right? When he
That's
hosted?
right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Interestingly enough, Jimmy Fallon was a guest at one of those, I believe.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I got to meet him. He was really nice guy. But who knew that he was going to be the next Tonight Show guy?
Yeah.
I just didn't know. Yeah. So good for him.
But you were with LeeAnn Womack too. LeeAnn Womack.
That's right. Yeah, for about 8 years. That was probably my favorite gig I ever did.
Really?
The band was, you know, so tight. We were just like a family, and we all got along really well, and we made a lot of really good music in some really cool places. You know,
Sure.
We did a lot of traveling, and got to see Venice and all kind of cool places. You know, that was another one we did the CMAs, I think, in Madison Square Garden, and that was a cool experience.
Yeah, the award shows are like unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we pantomimed that one, though.
Really?
I don't think we played on that one. We just lip-synced.
Joe Diffie. Got any fun stories about him?
Yeah, he was a great guy. I mean, he was so interesting, and he was super intelligent, and he was well read, and you know, it's the kind of thing you might not even think about him. You know, he was amazingly humorous, and he had amazing abilities with his words. He could he just knew so many words, and he would always, throw one out there, and just, what's this one mean? And he was an incredible guy, super smart, great voice, I think between him and LeeAnn, those are like some of the best country singers we've had in recent years.
Yeah. Definitely, for sure. I mean, you've worked with so many people over the course of your career. Is there anybody that we may not know you got to share the stage with?
Well, when I was with Rascal Flatts one time, Steve Lukather of Toto came out, and so we got to play a couple songs with him, and so that was kind of fun. Just little things I did. I played with Louise Mandrell and Michael Peterson. He was one of my first gigs when I moved to town. Was Michael Peterson. So, and he was really cool. I enjoyed playing with him.
So you've done a lot of work on the road, and have you had? I'm sure you've played in the studio some too. Mm-hmm. What's your preference? Do you prefer recording in the studio, or you just love playing live?
I've always enjoyed playing live, and that will always be my favorite. I like playing at night.
Sure. Sure. I mean, there's just nothing like playing in front of people that's like, you have that energy, that rush, that adrenaline. You don't really get that so much when you're just in a studio. Just maybe you might have some people around, but it's like, it just seems like you have more fun. It looks more fun when you're on stage.
I think there's certain kind of guys that are cut out for the studio and that are just brilliant in the studio. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think I'm that kind of player. I've never felt like I've ever been happy with anything I've ever come out with, if it's because I'm always trying to make it into something I think someone else wants instead of just doing completely what I want to do. And when I'm doing my own stuff in the studio, I'm much more happy with it because there's no rules. I can break whatever rule I want.
Well, you're your own boss.
Right.
When you get to do that.
That's right. There's no wrong notes.
No wrong notes at all. When you go on the road, what setup do you like? What keyboards do you like to play on? Does it give you that type of pristine sound that you like to use when you play?
Well, I always had kind of the same setup for a lot of years, and I was never really that happy. I love playing a grand piano, and I love playing a B3, none of which I could ever have on the road with me. So,
those are big.
They're big, and they're just, they're beautiful, and they talk. And some of these electric keyboards, I just, I play with them and I don't really think about it much. It's just whatever it is, it's getting by with the sound. And most of them sound pretty good, if we did a fly date, I'd end up with something I've never had before. And that was the only frustrating part, the fly dates, because you never get great gear when you're on a fly date.
You have your own setup, you have your gear, it's easy
right.
to carry,
Exactly. What everything does. Yeah.
We'll kind of segue here to this next selection. This is called Sorry Time, also by
American Limehouse. Yep.
And what's the background behind this one?
Well, this one could go for anybody, but at this particular time I wrote this one, it was when Tiger Woods was, they found out that he was having all those affairs, So, and that was sort of the motivation behind this one, was Tiger Woods and his, but it could go for anyone, because so many people we know rise up and they do something and they fall, and so that's kind of what this is.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and play Sorry Time right here on The Piano Men. All right. That was Sorry Time here on The Piano Men. Speaking with Kevin Adams tonight about his illustrious career in the music business. And, we kind of touched on this a little bit here. You've played in all kinds of genres. To you, What makes it important to be such a well-rounded musician?
I think it's better if it's easier to get work if you can do more different things. You know, you wear a cowboy hat sometimes, and sometimes a pork pie hat, you know. So it's just whatever, and that way, you could bring a little bit of money in if there's no jazz gigs, or a little if there's no country gigs.
Sure, that's right. Definitely. Can you explain what is the Nashville number system, and how common is it used here in Nashville for musicians?
I think everybody uses it here, and it's a great way of, just putting a tune down on one piece of paper. You can put the whole thing on one piece of paper, and everyone can read it down. And if at the last second we need a key change, you can modulate easily using the number system. You don't have to think about what. It's not so much letters as numbers. It's kind of like the old figure bass that they used to have in classical, that they used Roman numerals, but this is just kind of the number system. And instead of using Roman numerals, they're using numbers.
Was it hard for you to learn the number system when you first got here?
No, I'd already worked with the Roman numeral thing early on in jazz, so it didn't. I just took right to it. There was a few things that were rules for figure bass that weren't rules for Nashville number system. But that was easy to figure out.
Sure.
Yeah. In figure bass, you don't write in certain things. In the number system, you write everything in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. You've played with all these incredible people. You've played in multiple bands. Played in multiple genres. Kevin, tell me what's next for you. What you have any upcoming releases?
I do plan on doing another record of some kind of more electric jazz stuff. That's going to be my next thing, I believe. I've got a few things already recorded, and I'm just coming up with ideas right now for that. So I'm really hopeful that this year I'll do it, so that I could have one album that I released last year, then this one will be for this year, and I'll be happy to try to do that every year.
Sure. Briefly kind of explain to me, like, what's your songwriting process? Is it verse chorus, or does the chorus come to you first, or what kind of goes through your mind?
Well, I've written so many songs, and it's always different. Sometimes it'll just be a word that makes me do a song, and that's more common in country. Usually you have just a couple words, and that'll be your hook, and you write the whole song around that. Sometimes it's that way for me too. I'll just come up with a few words, but for the most part, I'll write starting with melody and then try to put the words to the melody. That is more often than not what I do.
Anything you want to say to aspiring musicians that kind of want to follow in your footsteps?
Wow. You really shouldn't even be in the business unless that's what makes you happy. If going on the road and, waking up and playing a rodeo and or whatever, a high school thing or whatever, if you just love playing, you won't care where you are as much as if you expect, to be treated like a star. It just doesn't, it takes a long time before I never experienced that myself. So
yeah, Lady Gaga wasn't born yesterday.
That's right. So
it takes years to perfect that craft.
That's right.
And plus the business has changed so much too in the last 30 plus years, since you got your start,
Yeah. I wouldn't even know about the business anymore. I've been so far removed from it, but it's still cool. They're still making cool stuff, and I'm happy for that.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of technological changes, with
Mm-hmm.
auto-tune and the electronic sound. I know we kind of talked a little bit about this earlier. The 70s was all about the raw, songwriting, singer-songwriter, and 80s was very, commercialized,
Mm-hmm.
brought us into the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
the rebellious grunge era and,
Yep.
pop. And now, we've got all this stuff around us. So, we got to make use of it while we can.
That's right. And it's all good stuff, man. I'm happy for everyone that's doing it. It's a great life if if you're with the right people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to network,
Mm-hmm.
meet folks.
That's right.
Go to different events. And, they've got, open mic nights around here in Nashville. That's definitely a place to start, showing your stuff.
Yep. That's right. It's a lot of places to play in Nashville now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about all the places that have closed. I mean, you got the Bluebirds still going strong here,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's true. They're going to move, aren't they? They're going to.
Oh.
I heard that they were going to move someplace. I don't know. Don't
Yeah.
quote me on it.
No, but, lots of stuff happening here in Nashville, a lot of movers and shakers.
Yep, definitely.
So where can people find you and your music if people want to know more about you? Also, where are you playing next if people want to come see you perform?
Let's see. Well, I'm playing at the Fiddle and Steel Guitar Bar. Now, what am I talking about? I had that in my mind. Playing at the Fillin' Station in Kingston Springs with some friends of mine on the 20th coming up here. We looked at that. It was a
Friday.
Friday night.
It's a
Okay.
Friday.
And we start at 7 and go to 10. And it's a real cool little neighborhood bar. Really, really cool. And it's warm, so they'll have the doors open in the patio, and we'll be outside playing a little bit. So that'll be fun.
It's very exciting, you're going back, you're finally having that chance to, go back after, the last 2.5 years, and you're getting a chance to play again. How do you feel?
It feels great. It feels just amazing. I have a group that I also play with downtown called the Pack of Crackers, and we play at Sambuca's sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, we just did about 2 weeks ago. We played one down there, and we play kind of Steely Dan sort of stuff with that band, some Toto and some kind of progressive sort of stuff, and so that's in funky stuff. It's a real funky band. We don't have any dates right now, but I'm sure some will come in.
Well, I just want to say, Kevin, we could be here, all night talking about this stuff, but, we're running out of time, unfortunately. But listen, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. It means a lot to me and to the listeners listening. And I would love to have you back on again. And, if you want to play something live in the studio, we'll make it happen.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you, Stanley. I appreciate it, man.
For sure. Well, that's going to do it for this week here on The Piano Men. You can like us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Piano Men Radio Show. We're going to leave things here with Get a Little Lovin' here from American Limehouse. I said it right. All right. Stay tuned, and I will see you next week.